Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about episode 5 of Jupiter's Legacy. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I really like where this episode takes us, obviously, kind of like the back and forth between the past and the present when it comes to Sheldon. Obviously, in the past, after his experience in Kansas and coming back home, still trying to get back to normal, but can't quite shake it. And he ends up digging up his dad's body and ends up finding the watch. And it's just kind of like that in itself, I think, was kind of the final key point to be like, all right, now I'm set my path. Like I've got to do this. I've got to figure this out. While present day, he's trying to figure everything out too. He's talking, which is so interesting. And I like how they initially present it because it's like, oh, he's in therapy, which is interesting. I think a lot of superheroes could probably deal with a little bit of therapy, but for him, it's like he's talking to Jack about the code and everything. And it's kind of what I'd kind of brought up in earlier episodes that I thought was kind of an interesting thing that they kind of sprinkle in there. And it's like now this episode, they just kind of outright say it. Like his need for a code is his way to kind of compensate. Like he ended up finding out all about the shady stuff about his dad, that his dad wasn't the good person that he was, because he talked about like, hey, like he would sit on the floor drinking his dad's whiskey after reading every paragraph of Grace's article. And it's like all that disappointment, that betrayal led him to create the code, because he wanted to like go like swing to the extreme left. It's kind of what the code was. The code was kind of what he needed at the time, because he had to be extra good to make up for what terrible stuff his dad did. It's like I thought my dad was one way, he ended up being a terrible person, and so I have to go to the left. And now as time is going on, it seems like the pendulum has gone extreme one way, you know, because he's stressing it more and more. And it's like for most of his life, it gave him comfort, basically the world being what it is chaos. But for so long, he's always seen the world in black and white. And the fact is, Jack is telling him there's shades of gray to everything, you know. Because obviously, and also what's really interesting, it's like why the code is also so important, because it's like anyone that's in the police or the military, they are allowed to kill someone if it's like kind of a last resort type of situation. It's not meant to be it's not meant to be a go-to, but it is. They still have that right when the situation calls for it, and there's no like issue, but like he kind of puts this on like the Union that like, no, we don't kill, we have this very specific code we live by, you know. It's like it is this interesting thing where it's like the military and police don't have can't, like I said, that can be a complicated conversation within itself for some people, but it's like they are allowed to kill without it being, under certain circumstances, not like illegal, like not a terrible thing. It's just kind of like the way the world is. But for him, it's like he's putting a scrutiny on the Union of we don't kill those. So it's like but it's also like the reason why, like every time like people out there in the Union are fighting, they have to remember that code. And he was like, so what's that? You know, it's like that's your way of kind of getting your way of kind of living forever. And he was like, what am I, a narcissist? Is that what you're saying? He's like, no, it's just that it's your way to make sure that you live on forever through those that you love and care about, which is like interesting, because it's like as long as the code lives, there's some part of him that continues on, whether it be, you know, if he's gone and Grace is still around, it kind of instills in them, his friends, his family, his children. So that was an interesting element to kind of really think about. Like I was like, oh, like, you know, because a lot of people want to live forever in the people that they love. Like they want to be able to, like, their kids to, like, those who they care about, to hold a small part of them when they're gone, you know? That way it's like you're always with them to a certain extent. So I just thought that was kind of a fascinating element. And honestly, that was a really interesting, and I think that speaks volumes. Like the one person he can talk to about all this stuff is a villain he's like, yeah, you know, I've tried to kill you for 20 years. He's like, yeah, it feels like you're the only one that really understands me. That's an interesting and kind of sad aspect, that like you can't open up to your own family, your friends, but you can open up to a guy that tried to kill you for like 20 years. But I guess it's like when this guy's battled you for like 20 years and going toe to toe with you, he's a super genius. It's kind of like, oh, like he knows you better than anyone knows yourself. There is this moment though, like he kind of takes his glasses off and he kind of slaps. I think it was just kind of like he slaps like the table or something like that. I think I don't know whether that's supposed to represent the thing of like, it just bothers him. It's like, oh, I have to kind of submit to your will because I'm stuck in Supermax. And, oh, you get to visit me and you have the freedom to kind of go whenever you want to. And I'm just kind of stuck here. And it's just kind of like, you know, it's like I was an adversary. I've tried to kill you for 20 years. And now what am I reduced to? Just being your therapist. Like, I'm sure that aspect of things kind of doesn't sit well with him. But, you know, we'll see. I just thought that was such an interesting element. That was such, because I was like, oh, like at first, like I said, it was just an interesting thing knowing like he's going to therapy. It's a whole level of complicated when it's like, oh, your therapist is a villain locked up in Supermax that you that's tried to kill you for 20 years. It's like, that's, once again, it's crazy and sad that that's like the only person in the world you can open up to, because he doesn't even feel like he can turn to Grace because Grace doesn't see things the way he does, because it's like, kind of like, what was it? I think she is saying like a lesson and punishment, you know, because making Brandon go see the autopsy of Black Star. For one, it's like, you made that decision on your own. It's like, but you weren't here. She's like, that's BS. You could have tracked me down and we could have had that conversation, but we didn't. You made that decision on your own. And that's what I didn't talk about it last episode, but was that last episode or episode before last? No, that was episode 3, I believe. Yeah, she was talking about the fact is that you can't control everything, and that is his issue, that he wants to control everything, because even Jackie talked about it. It's like he wants to believe like the world is so, once again, black and white, that it's good and evil, but for him it's like, once again, Jack said that there are shades of gray light, because living in it, that's like kind of like, he says like, oh, I'm not naive. It's like, there is a naivete to it, like that you want the world to be such a way that like it can just fall into two categories. But the fact is, the world has always been the complicated thing that it has been. It's just you created. Your world is your own creation in the sense that you made it so that in your mind it's like, no, it's either this or that. Like there was kind of no room in the middle, even though a lot of the world has grown to live in that middle and in that gray area, those shades of gray. And so, because there was also the conversation about why he lives in those percentages, why that's so important to him. Because for him, it just feels like if 78% of people are down for Brandon doing what he did, then he kind of feels like the world kind of lost its way by his standards. But like, once again, he's kind of going by the standards he created like 90 years ago. But also, you're living in a world that's not the same. The world has changed on so many different levels. So it was just kind of interesting. Another angle to this episode is the whole Barnabas thing, which I love that he shows up. And it's just like, Brandon, I knew you when you were a wee lad. He's like, if things worked out differently, you'd be calling me daddy. And it's just like, it's such an asshole. Which really quickly, Walt and Brendan had that conversation a little bit beforehand about like, he's like, Uncle Walt, what would you have done? He's like, honestly, I'm not as strong as you or your dad. And he's like, well, that's not an answer. He's like, because I don't have one. Like, we're in unknown territory. He's like, what you did, we can't change. All we can do is just kind of keep moving forward. But like, there's nothing any of us can do. What's done is done, and we're here. Like, this is the situation. This is where we find ourselves. So, but Barnabas is there to kind of examine the body, and obviously he's talking mad shit to Fitz. It's like, yeah, you can't really comprehend this, blah, 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 blah. I guess I also misunderstood what their powers are, because he's like, oh, you can light up stuff. Like, it isn't like, because when Petra was fighting Black Star in the first episode, I thought she was like using super speed or something. But that turns out not to be the case. It just seems like their power's light based. I'm not really 100% sure and just like what everyone's abilities necessarily are. We get an understanding what Barnabas's abilities are, that basically he can manipulate inorganic matter. So for example, later on he turns Grace's dress red. He was able to kind of split the roof to like that so the Union of Justice place, and he was able to kind of pull off Black Star's armor. But obviously, looking inside of him, they ended up finding this orb, and Barnabas, because it ended up being like a puzzle, ended up solving it. They open it, and lo and behold, what's on the inside? Walt and Sheldon's father's watch, and I was like, oh, how did that get there? I was like, oh. But then we find out, like, Sheldon has it, so it's like, not only was the Black Star kind of like a perfect copy, which even they commented on, like, in episode 2, being like, Black Star talks a lot of shit. It's like, but this Black Star didn't talk at all. So I guess that was supposed to be a sign of like, maybe it all kind of fits, and maybe that's what that's supposed to represent. Like, oh, this is a Black Star that didn't talk. Inside of it is not only a puzzle, but also like a copy of their dad's watch, an exact copy. And it's like, well, what's that supposed to mean? And it's like, well, the only person who could do something like this technologically is George. So once again, correcting a lot of misconceptions I had. It turns out George isn't dead. I thought they were kind of implying it was, but I think it's another member is dead because George turned on them. I think that's what they were kind of implying. Or maybe they were saying because George turned on us. Because like I said, that kept confusing me because I kept thinking Sky Fox and George were different people. Like I said, that I brought that up in the episode with Hutch. I thought that's what kind of confused me so much. But it's like, no, like, I think they're saying like Sky Fox is dead because Sky Fox is who he was part of he was part of the Union. So either it was a different person, George was responsible for killing, or cause, like I said, it just confuses me. Like I could look into it, but I just don't want to accidentally spoil myself on something. But it's like that still keeps confusing me. Like I said, I apologize. I'm an idiot. It's just like the way they present it, kind of like confused. Where my mind is currently, I was thinking like Sky Fox is his code name because it's just all Grace said was Sky Fox, and Walt was like, So either it has to deal with like, yes, George ended up killing someone named Sky Fox when he betrayed them, or that is his code name and it's supposed to represent, oh, when George left us and betrayed us, Sky Fox died. In the sense that like his superhero identity died. Once again, that's my understanding of it. Like I said, it confused me. Like it's something that's probably definitely not confusing to anyone else, but it is to me. So, a couple episodes later, I still have no 100% clarity on it. But regardless, but the moment Sheldon says like it's been years, why take if George is behind this? Why would he wait till now to try and kill us? It doesn't make any sense. But then Walt says like that's always been kind of George's thing, that he'll kind of tell a joke. And the fact of the matter is, he's the only one who knows the punchline, so that's what this seems like this all is. And I feel like that goes back to the point of Black Star, this copy of Black Star not talking, that is meant to be, there's something to that. I mean, let's not forget, he is the one that kind of pieced it together, like, oh, some of the stuff Sheldon's talking about isn't like 100% crazy, which is interesting that you bring all this to the forefront about George, and then like, obviously we see in the past George helping Sheldon put everything together, because George is the first one Sheldon went to because, and it's like, yeah, I sound a little crazy, but it's like, I saw all of us. He's like, yeah, but you saw us at the table where the farmer had killed like his family, right? So does that mean we're all dead? He's like, I don't know what it means, but I saw all of us. So will you help me? And George is like, if it was me that came to you, what would you say? And he was like, that, you're my friend. We've been friends for a long time. Seems like forever. And I'd believe you. And he's like, well, you have your answer. So George jumps aboard this, and obviously they proceed to, first to get Grace, because Grace got fired, because it's like, there's kind of a lot of people getting unemployed in this time, but it's like, yeah, I'm the first one to go because I'm the dame in a skirt and I don't kind of have my penis swinging everywhere. But I like the interesting like back and forth between George and Grace, because she's not, because I think especially for that time, she's not your typical lady. She's very like, oh, screw yourself, eat shit type of person. Like, she's very strong-willed, and it's just like, in that time, it's probably like frowned upon. I'm like, oh, a woman being strong-willed like that, so. But George being like, oh, I like her. It's like, oh, she's getting on top, and it's like, where's my mug? And she's like, Izzy, go over there, pour whatever he had in, and just give me my damn mug, So it's like, well, they kind of need her. I even love it's like, oh, I had a vision. He's like, and George had to come up, a vision of the future, of a better future for all of us. And it's like, this way, like, hey, I'm going to employ you. You're going to get the scoop of a lifetime. You're going on an expedition. So I love that George is there to kind of smooth everything out, because if Sheldon goes spouting like what this really is all about, he's going to seem crazy. So, another person they bring into the fold is Fitz. Obviously, Fitz and Willie have a resentment towards Sheldon. And it's Sheldon's trying to say, like, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. I'm going to offer your son and, once we do this, we can potentially make enough money for me to come back and open up the steel mill. And, like, everyone, including your dad, get their job back, So, but it is a situation, that Fitz is initially like, no, I'm not going to do it. And George ends up pulling Sheldon away. And when a time, Willie has a conversation with his dad and be like, yeah, you don't air your dirty laundry in front of like essentially you don't air your laundry in front of a company, and that situation. Your mom was right, that is company. And it's like, because Fitz is like, how dare he come up here? It's like, the fact that after what that man did to us, it's like, but it wasn't him, it was his dad. He's a son trying to make right what his dad did wrong, So the fact of the matter is, it's like our situation was already bad enough before. Even when things were good, it's not like things were good for us. The fact of the matter is, now that the world's in a shit place, the fact of the matter is, like, all a black man can hope for is a kick in the teeth. When he's looking for a good, honest work for him. So for him saying to Fitz, it's like, this is an opportunity, And so Fitz, and obviously outside Sheldon's, debating, it's like, no, we need him. And George is like, well, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If not, what's the use? And so, it ultimately does work out, because Fitz is like, all right, I need to pay this 6 months payment up advance, because if something happens to me, I just want to make sure my family's taken care of, So things kind of work on that front. But then you have Sheldon trying to bring this up to Walt, but for Walt, it's like, no, I can't do it because you weren't here when I needed you to. There was supposed to be a board meeting, and you were supposed to be here to help me stand up to them, but you not being here, it was just me against them, and now they're going to sell the business for pennies on a dime. But at the end of the day, Sheldon's at first kind of upset by it, but it's like, at the same time, it's like, it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, I think there's a level of it doesn't matter to him, because it's like, this company was built on a lie. Like, my dad, like, it's to him, I think it's also because, like, this is more important because we could do so much good with whatever this is. He feels like it's the right way to go, especially considering, like, everything associated with that business, at least for him, is tarnished. The fact is, Walt's always been someone who can kind of who can live in the gray. I think, at least back then. Who knows how he feels now? I think he kind of is still living in that gray to a certain extent, whereas, like, Sheldon tries to live it like in the 100% good, but Walt tries to he tried to save the business, because like, he even said in the beginning, like, I'm like, we kind of did some, we got our hands dirty, so, like, he's not completely brought down by all the stuff that their dad is on, like the way Sheldon is. And so for him, it's like, this business is all he kind of really had, because I think it was just like Sheldon struggling with everything about their father, he is to a certain extent, in the sense that, like, it's all he has left to hold on to their dad. It's like, this business is kind of what he latched on to. It's what he dedicated. Like, this isn't just like a business to him. This is his life, because he dedicated so much blood, sweat, and tears to this business that is kind of all he has at the end of the day. Cause we don't see Walt's personal life. Sheldon, we see, like, obviously he's engaged to Jane and everything, and we see, like, he has George for a friend. We don't see what Walt's life is. We don't see him having any friends. We don't see him having a significant other. I mean, we don't even know if that's the case present day. Like, he probably went from one business to the next, in a sense, like, our family business is all I have, to our family business of being superheroes is all I have, So I think that in itself kind of might speak volumes, but it actually took George convincing him, because at first, like, Walt's like, oh, you're, like, feeding his delusions and stuff like that. But for him, it's like, because I think there's a lot more to George than Walt's giving him credit, because it's like, oh, you basically had everything handed to you on a silver platter. And it's like, yeah, my parents being dead, that's a silver platter for me. I give anything to have them back. But it's like, Walt doesn't know George. He just thinks he knows George. It's like, because George puts on this front, because it's his way of dealing with the world, I mean, you can make the argument that makes him and Sheldon very similar in that regard. Like, the Code was Sheldon's way of dealing with the world, kind of like trying to pretend like everything's sunshine and rainbows was kind of like George's way of kind of doing that. Like, I think everyone in that group of the Union kind of had their role in the play in that, but George kind of spoke to him in a sense that, like, this isn't about saving a business. This is about saving yourself. For him, it's like, do you believe, like, what's out there is out there? And he's like, I don't know. But basically, like, how you're trying to save yourself, that's why Sheldon went off to Kansas and stuff like that, because he was trying to do the same thing. The fact of the matter is, it's like, he was kind of implying, like, how their old man had basically screwed them over by doing what he did. Hell, even Sheldon, even present day, still has a nightmare of like trying to save his dad. It's like I look at my dad, I'm like, Dad, it's me, Sheldon, but my dad doesn't recognize me, and he goes off the edge. And no matter what, Sheldon's never fast enough. He wasn't fast enough back then. He's still not fast enough now to save his dad. And obviously that trauma, he tried to take that trauma and turn it into something positive, but that trauma is still trauma regardless. And I just don't think he's ever fully dealt with it like he should have. And I think that's why like everything is starting to crack now. It's like, it's, as I said, basically 90 years of baggage that he hasn't 100% dealt with. So, and what that kind of translates and what that looks like, I think. But Sheldon is like, George is like, in the past, he's like, regardless, like he believes this is what Sheldon needs to heal, even saying like maybe he's not the only one, because everyone, if there's a part of this group, might actually need this to heal. But I think he was also pointing to Walt, like, you need this to heal. And obviously Sheldon's like, oh my god, we're gonna go to Morocco and everything, and he's excited and he's packing. But then Jane says, in this vision of yours, was I there? And he was like, no. She takes off the ring just because I think it's just kind of like, right, because whatever your future is, I'm not meant to be a part. I was curious like how that whole thing with Jane was going to play out. It also plays a role in the whole thing of kind of something Jack was also pointing out too, like it is a perspective thing. It's like, yeah, Sheldon has his perspective on things, but also it's like, once again, it's been decades, so like you might have skewed things over the years. Once again, there's always that complicated thing of like, what is the truth? There's someone's side of things, there's another person's side of things, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. Tend to be, not always, but I feel like that's still kind of very true, because you might skew things memory-wise in, like, being a certain way that maybe they weren't 100%. Like, yeah, you could get 90% right, but then, like, that other person adds in their 10%, and that altogether becomes the truth, So, I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting thing. Like, maybe, Sheldon is skewing things. But present day, it's like, they need to find out about George, so he visits Hutch. And Hutch is like, oh, like, he, like, teleports away. Doesn't matter. Like, I guess knowing exactly where he was, which I think speaks volumes, that shows you, like, how powerful Sheldon is. That Sheldon was able to kind of fly immediately where, it took him, like, seconds to fly to where he was. And then, like, is like, nope, I need to talk to you. And he picks up the thing, and Hutch tries to say, like, home, but it won't come back to it because Sheldon's so powerful, he's holding it in place. I was like, I guess because it needs to kind of, like, escape the person's grip first before it can, like, because it needs to, like, the person's grip has to be loose enough that it can, like, teleport out of their hand. I don't know. I think that's just so interesting that, like, that Sheldon's power is so mighty that this thing literally can't teleport out of his hands because his grasp on it's so strong. Like I said, I think it needs to kind of, like, break free of the grasp a little bit, or whatever's kind of hold. Like, it needs to be a loose enough space for it to kind of, like, create, like, the warp zone around itself, or whoever it is. But, like, him and Hutch sit down and talking is obviously a conversation about George. And so it's like, I've overlooked a lot of the criminal stuff that you've been up to. It's not like you're a model citizen. But he also talks about, yeah, I can't believe George turned on us like that. And he's like, according to my mom, it's you guys that turn on. And he's like, well, I guess everyone's got their perspective. It's like, that's also, part of, the reality of things. It's like, for like, it's like, oh, everyone kind of sees things a certain way. He's like, no, I see the world the way it is. It's kind of Hutch's point. So, but it's like, help me find your dad. And it's like, every time he tries to go, all right, take me to my dad. And it's like, every time he does it, it takes him to a different strip club. And it's like, which also showcases, like, the thing can also teleport other people too, depending on if he sets it up that way. But it's like, why is that though? Maybe, because for Hutch, it's like, maybe it's my dad's sick joke. Once again, your dad loves puzzles. The fact is, he's like, yeah, it doesn't seem like it's the same strip club. The way he was talking about it is like a different strip club every time. But maybe there's meaning in that. Like, once again, maybe it's the inside joke that no one else knows the punchline except for George. So obviously, like, we see that there's a thing going on between Chloe and him, because he was there for her when she was in the hospital. We saw that at the beginning, and now it's like, oh, they're hooking up, like, whatever this thing is. And it's like, yeah, your dad came to visit me. She's like, damn it, like, this is what he does. He intimidates. It's like, it starts off like this, and then he intimidates it's like, no, he wasn't there to talk about you. I don't think he knows about whatever this is. She's like, oh, then what was it about? My dad is like, what'd you tell him? The truth, mostly. But then we look and see that he has, like, that locked door. So, as I was kind of wondering it does seem like, once again, the most powerful being on the planet did seem like Utopian, so it does seem like he is gunning for Sheldon, you know? It's like he's made it clear when talking to Chloe, it's like, I'm not afraid of your father, and he looks at the door of like, right, whatever he's building, that device, whatever that's going to look like at the end of the day, because it also begs the question, it could have been Hutch that created the copy Black Star. It seems like it could be, because it seems like he's kind of got his father's genius, or at least like, you know, good with like, building stuff and putting it together. Like, it seemed like they were kind of hinting towards that. So I don't know whether it is George, because like I said, I was under the impression George was dead, but it's like, no, he's still alive and potentially out there somewhere. And it's like, why wait till now to strike, you know, after all these years? Maybe something's, you know, but maybe now it's Hutch. But I don't know. Maybe Hutch's thing is separate from whatever this Black Star thing is with George. Or at the very least, maybe it's meant to look like George, but it's actually someone else. I mean, not even Hutch. Maybe it's a third party at play here. Who knows? We'll probably get answers to that soon enough. But that's what I believe that to be. Yeah, like he's ready to strike. And it seems like Utopian, like he probably is going to go through a lot of people in the Union, but it seems like Utopian is, like there's stuff there that maybe there's stuff between George and Sheldon that even Grace and Walt and Fitz and everyone else in the Union had no idea about. You know, we'll ultimately have to wait and see where all of this takes us going forward. Obviously, Walt's going to need Barnabas's help, so it's going to keep him around as they try to, like, you know, figure this whole situation out. So, but I'm really interested to see ultimately where all this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.